All right, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Market Pulse this Wednesday. Of course, today we are on the sidelines of the MICE stakeholder engagement here at the KICC. Now, you might be wondering, what does MICE mean? This is the Meeting, Incentive, Conference and Exhibition Stakeholder Engagement here at the KICC. Now, over the years, Kenya has been known as one of those destinations where high-level meetings have happened. Recently, this year, we have seen the IDA meeting, that is by the World Bank. We've also seen the Africa Development Bank meeting being held here at the KICC. Now, we want to understand, how does this help the economy? How can SMEs take part in some of these conversations? How can they ensure that they take advantage once these conferences, these high-level meetings come into the country? Now, to help me with this conversation this morning, I'm joined by KICC CEO, that is James Mwaura, who has been at the helm of this revolution. And we want to understand what is his intention in making sure that we place Kenya and KICC as that convention that continues to make headlines across the continent. Bwana CEO, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Jimmy.
All right, so first of all, over the last couple of years, we have been struggling, so to speak, in terms of these MICE conferences, the big conferences. We are seeing a good number of them going to our neighbors in Kigali. So let's start with, where did we lose a step? How did we lose that market?
Thank you very much. I think previously, at one point, because of lack of a good facility that was meeting the market standards, as a result of not very aggressive marketing strategies, we went some few steps down compared to our main competitors, who is Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa. And we've now had some emerging competitors, who are Rwanda, and also to some extent even Uganda. So it was as a result of not being very keen on our actual infrastructure in terms of venues, in terms of technology and modernization, and of course the approach to the world, the current global trends on meetings. That is MICE.
All right, so whenever we have these meetings, one of the things that has become sort of a norm, we will see a lot of renovations happening at KICC. We'll see a lot of investments and a lot of budgetary allocation coming to KICC. But the argument from Kenyans has always been, we see all this money being spent, but KICC should be able to generate enough revenue. So how do we make sure we bridge that disconnect, that even as these conferences come in, KICC as a parastatal can be able to stand on itself and fund itself?
Thank you, Jimmy. You note the actual structure of KICC is that it is a state corporation owned by the government, meaning the shareholders and the investors who bring the capital itself is the government. So when we have these big conferences, some of them are driven by clients who have very specific needs, and more so when they are government-driven MICE activities or events. But that notwithstanding, actually KICC, first to make a clarification, it is self-sufficient. It does not derive any funding from the National Treasury, save for capital investment by the National Treasury, who technically is the only sole shareholder on behalf of Kenyans. Just on a highlight, you realize, like, the year that has just ended, the year 2023-2024, KICC is looking at a post-tax profit of approximately Kenyan shillings 230 million. And that is far more than what KICC needs for its general and normal operations. So sometimes the input in terms of capital and infrastructure development is because the National Treasury is the shareholder who should put in capital, but in return KICC then needs to pay dividends. And that's what I'm confirming, that yes, it is running it's a profit, it's a going concern, and probably in days to come, KICC may generate sufficient enough even to undertake the development itself as and when need comes. But we also note the age of KICC. It is now 51 years of age. To be able to handle the competition that comes with modern convention centers and needs of clients who are in these events, sometimes that infrastructure adjustment becomes a necessity.
Oh, wait, and just looking at that infrastructure adjustment, I'd want to know, how much capital will then KICC require to be able to compete with the likes of the Santon Convention, for instance?
you may not put that capital into KICC. You may need to develop another modern convention center so that KICC retains its niche market, which is one based on its architectural design, which attracts a lot of global interest in terms of people who want to come for these meetings. But equally, instead of trying to build another KICC within the KICC, that then can be invested. And I think that has been the government plan, to put up another convention center now in the form and design that runs with that modern look, but also retain the niche occupied market by KICC.
All right, let's take on the revenue conversation. And you're talking about 230 million profit.
Post-tax profit.
Yeah, post-tax profit. And recently, these are conversations that I'm sure you have had. At some point, we were talking about privatizing KICC and giving it to a private investor. But the question therein is, why would we need to sort of make sure we give KICC to a private investor if already the parastatal is making money?
My take on that would be public-private partnerships are models of management which are global. It is not unique to Kenya. And that will not take away the profitability of KICC. Either of the two models work. Putting proper strategies when KICC is fully owned and run by government will deliver the much-needed lifeline for KICC. Yeah. Having a model of having strategic investor come and also invest in KICC and run it together with the government is a model that works. And I'll pull some 2-3 examples. That's how Rwanda Convention Center, Kigali Convention Center runs. It's a land jointly by the government and Radisson Brew. Yeah. So the convention center is built and owned by government, but partly managed by Radisson Brew. Mm. That eradicates the government bureaucracies and allows more of a commercial approach to the business of maize. So those two models work.
All right, so just before we settle on the maize conversation, I would want to know, during your tenure as CEO KICC, in terms of revenue growth, where do you want to leave KICC?
There are 2 cycles to a CEO, 3 years if you get a renewal. Yeah. I'm looking at KICC that will be posting above 1 billion profit, post-tax profit. And the strategy to that is just making a major leap in terms of local market. And how we approach the local market is introduction of product offerings that are geared towards the local clientele. And what we've already put into investment, and it is underway, yeah. We are at 80% advanced level of installing high-pressure dancing fountains, pure replica of what is in Burj Khalifa. And that by itself will be a regional attraction sufficient enough to generate revenue more or less equal to what conferences generate. Mm-hmm. We've also gone ahead and revived the industry of concerts that sometimes back used to be a very agile bit of business at KICC. We are now at high level with different stakeholders in that industry, and we've signed quite a number of agreements on how that business is coming back to KICC. Actually, we are leveraging on the complaint that people are having of noise in the estates to bring back the business of entertainment where it should be. So we have quite a number of strategies in place. Mm-hmm. We have formed strategic business units, specifically targeting specific areas of business. We have a whole team whose only responsibility is to work for service level agreements with entities that bring businesses to Kenya. I'll tell you, for example, we have a service level agreement with the National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and therefore all the global meetings which are localized in Kenya will be happening at KICC. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing we have had with KQ. I think a day or 2 days ago, we launched an office, the Asante Executive Hub, purely also for the same, so that we are able to offer a product to delegates at a rate that is agreed between ourselves and a KQ. That will also be a high motivation. So we are approaching business in the context of real commerce.
All right. Yes. So let's talk about just even the investment that has been made at the KICC over the last year. How much, in terms of a figure, how much are we looking at?
I want to believe you are looking in the context of infrastructure adjustment.
Yes.
Yes, we for the last 2 or so years, The national government has invested approximately 1.9 billion in infrastructural adjustment of the institution to meet the needs of the various conferences that you have mentioned. To start with, it was the Climate Summit. Then we have had, the major ones just to highlight is the Climate Summit, which set the pace for the structural adjustment. Yeah. We have had the AFDB, African Development Bank Summit, the Fertilizer and Soil Summit, the IDA, World Bank Summit. Yeah. All those are major group of conferences that some of them are happening in Africa for the first time. Yeah. For example, ACS. So government put in approximately shillings 1.9 billion, purely development, nothing recurrent.
All right, and just looking at that capital injection, yes. When you compare that with the revenue that came out of these conferences, yeah. Did we get value for that investment?
Yes, there is value in the sense that if my reporting is that the year ending 30th June 2024, we are reporting a post-tax profit of 234 million. Yeah. The gross revenue, and that is just that year, will go to approximately 4 billion. Right. That tells you if we used to give the standard lifespan of that investment to be 10 years, we shall recoup that investment and make more gain on it. If you just to get into the actual computation of return on investment.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So when you look at mice, that mice category, particularly here in Kenya, what would you say has been the major challenge in terms of attracting these and bidding for some of these global conferences to come here to the country?
There are two main challenges. One is that besides KICC, we do not have another sufficiently large venue that can host approximately 6,000 delegates and above seating capacity. Yeah. Actually, that hall is only Savo. The private sector, and of course even the public sector, we do not have any other hall that is the size of Savo. So sometimes when you're going for the bidding, you want to sell Destination Kenya, and the delegate capacity you're looking at is a seated capacity of 10,000 and above, then you lack that capacity. So if we can have more investments in the convention facilities, so that when we're bidding, we can place a bid and say, fine, we can have a capacity of 10,000 seated. Mm-hmm. That will be a plus. Second is that we have not had a well-focused agency whose responsibility is marketing mice for the Destination Kenya. I think there's a Gazette notice about a convention bureau, which is a welcome, a complementary in the marketing of mice for purposes of Destination Kenya. That is KICC as just one party to it, but also the private sector in its large extent having to participate in that business. That will be different from the work being done by the Kenya Tourism Board, because this focus, it is very intentional on maize alone.
All right, so let's talk about the change of strategy, particularly in selling KICC.
Yes.
How is that looking? What is your strategy around turning that and making KICC profitable, making sure that even for some of these expos that we are seeing being taken up by the private sector can come back to KICC?
What we've done, we've brought the private sector together. I'd say of today, we shall be having a maize stakeholders forum for the entire country. Yeah. Just to demystify the difference between the public venue, which is KICC, and the private venues. Then we find a common purpose for both for Destination Kenya. That will include models of sharing business and also models of joint marketing for all the venues for the Destination Kenya. That is one. Second, we have intentionally approached and competed for chairing ICA African chapter, because that is where business comes from. ICA is International Congress and Convention for meetings. So I will be the chair. I am the chair, elected chair by Africa for purposes of that, meaning we shall be able to deal in where possible direct meetings of associations to Kenya as a destination, and of course to KICC as a venue, as and where the capacity necessary is what is available at KICC. So we have both strategies at local level and strategies at a regional level.
All right, so there's a special group category of investors that I'm really keen about whenever there are these conferences, these global conferences happening at KICC, we get to see five-star service providers, five-star hotels and the likes. But the question that I would want to know is, how can SMEs tap into that business class? How can we get SMEs as part of the vendors providing services to the KICC?
Actually, on any event, the structure of business at KICC is that KICC is a venue, though also the agency which has the responsibility of MICE in Kenya. When we get all these international conferences, KICC is not a supplier of any product other than space in organizing and managing the event. So the total of the procurements are from third parties. The five-star hotels and the category that you've referenced to contribute only to an extent of 30%. 70% of these supplies are by SMEs, meaning, and I'll give you an arbitrary example of the AFDB. The AFDB budget was approximately Kenya shillings 260 million. Of this 260 million, the space cost that is direct to KICC is approximately 100 million. The 160 million goes to third parties. Of these 160 million, the one that will go to the category of five-star hotels will be approximately 30%, for basic reason. The five-star hotels will only serve a category of delegates who, by assessment and by their needs, fit that. Otherwise, in one conference, we'll have 3 categories of caterers. We'll have the caterers that will serve that high-level delegation, that's the presidents and heads of government. Then we shall have the middle category of 3-star hotels that serves the larger population of all the delegates. Then we shall have what we call street vendors. We normally reserve a whole space for street vendors. The area that is next to the Coca-Cola there, we allow. And actually, for street vendors, we do not charge them. So we allow them space, we provide them with security, so that the entire population of delegates that do not belong to these other 2 categories also get to benefit from that product. But then also the service providers make a commercial sense from it.
All right, and the reason I ask that is because we have a lot of young people getting into business. And of course, whenever they see these conferences, the questions that I personally get is, how do I take part in such a conference? What is the bidding process? And if you could just take us through that to help them understand what is required of them.
Basically, what is required of them is, for us to be able to do that, you operate on framework agreements. Our framework agreements are expandable depending on the need, because each client has a specific need and no client is like the other. So what we do is, when we receive something we call a checklist from the client, we check through what their needs are. Then if we realize there's a particular category of vendors that we need to expand, we do the advertisement in the portal and the portal of PPRA. Then from there, we require people just to fill in the bidding documents procedure just that they are supposed to do. So, and we have now the preferred category, the youth and women in business. So what they need to do is just go to the PPRA portal or KICC portal, have the requisite categorization, and by categorization, I mean then they must be in possession of the AGPO certificate, which is given by the National Treasury, so that they're able to exclusively participate in the category that is reserved, because that is exclusively reserved for that group of people. Then they fill in the bid, not the bid documents, but see, they fill in the documents to become part of the framework agreement suppliers. Then what to do when the events are there, we should just invite the people who are in the frameworks to come and do the supply. The beauty of it is that KICC, no single supplier can meet the needs. So at any given moment in time, we shall have a multiple of suppliers, even in a similar single category. We shall have a multiple of them. Therefore, they just need to be keen. And if they have any inquiry, they can just come to our procurement office. They will be directed where to find the documents in the portal, because that's a procedure by law. They'll find it in the PPRA portal and KICC portal. They download the documents, fill in them, submit them, they are evaluated. Then we sign framework agreements with them for a particular period of time. But we keep on revising those framework agreements to include more people and to revise the specification depending client needs.
All right, because actually that brings me to the question of, does KICC have a list, for instance, of suppliers or service providers that it will go to on a regular?
The way it is, there are two approaches to that. Yes, the law requires you have a list of suppliers that is consistently and constantly updated, at least to the minimum every 6 months.
Yeah.
That list exists. That is one element of it. Then we have the framework agreements. These framework agreements are for suppliers of specific, for example, the supply of water. You see, you may not tell a particular conference will require 6,000 bottles of half-liter water.
Yeah.
But now you have a framework agreement with 2-3 companies that supply water. So when that client expresses that need, you'll call the 3. You'll do 2,000, depending on your capacities, because actually no single supplier can do that within that time frame and deliver. Yeah. So we have the framework agreements, but you have the list of suppliers whom we even do the invitation for quotations for, and that list is updated to the minimum every 6 months. So we have those two sets. And that's why I explained that the youth can join under the preferred category to have framework agreements, but equally they are not prohibited to participate in the general category where you have a continuous updating of the list. Under this category, we shall do invitation of quotations. Yeah. Under this other category, we shall sign framework agreements for specific periods with prices capped. And then for procurements that are non-related to trade, because those are trade procurements that are now within operations, depending on the value, then we go to open tenders.
All right. Yeah, because that, again, brings in the question of, is there a capital requirement, a minimum capital requirement for some of these SMEs?
Not necessary. You see, as I told you, it ranges from very small quantities to large quantities, and no single supplier can meet all those demands. For example, if we had an event on a weekend of 300 or 400 delegates, and these people want catering, want water, we will not go for the big vendors in that business, because it will also not make a lot of business sense to them. Yeah. We shall now go to these other categories, though the product is the same. Yeah.
All right, so just in closing, when you look at the future of MICE and having established some of these gaps, what is the way forward to make sure that, again, we put Kenya back on the map as the premier destination for MICE and for conferences?
The way is to approach the world MICE market as a destination Kenya, as opposed to as a venue KICC. And that is where you are now organizing the National MICE Forum. Yeah. Actually, later in the year, we shall be holding an Nairobi International MICE Expo, where we are now putting all private and public sector entities together in Kenya here to host their counterparts internationally. And we shall make it an annual calendar event that will allow Kenya to showcase all its business-to-business capabilities to the global world. Meaning, in subsequent biddings, we shall be talking to a group of people who already have had an experience. And we will be making that an annual event, just like we have scheduled the conferences globally. So that is one approach to it. The second approach to it is that I think in course of time, government will may find it necessary under the existing registration, because I think there's a gazette notice on how to come up with probably a convention bureau, because that will be more focused in marketing and bidding for destination Kenya, as opposed to a particular single venue. So it will play a very complementary role to all the venues, KICC inclusive, and that will bring more business to destination Kenya. Notwithstanding that KICC will benefit, but even other bigger and smaller venues will also have a fair share of that MICE business.
When you look at the MICE business, particularly the MICE segment, what is the potential market that we could tap into?
Kenya has a very good, is well received globally, and we have made it our business first to dominate Africa. As we're talking, we have just finished participating in an expo that was in Nigeria. We call it Akoba, and the way you go about this business, you go obtain reads, and I can tell you we're already having like 4 very potential reads that are likely to culminate to business in less than 2 years. So we have made it our business as KICC to set representation in all global events that are cyclic in nature, so that we praise our bids, so that when it comes to consideration for competition, we are invited now to showcase our capabilities. And this year alone, we've participated in more than 8. Yeah. Meaning, out of 8, you're likely to make business from 2, that is more than sufficient in that industry. If for 8 participations you can cross 2 international events, then you're good.
All right. Can you talk about the frequency? Because I know sometimes we might have a conference in January and then in between the year there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that even during this slow period, KICC is still profitable, KICC is still able to pay its staff and service suppliers?
Yeah, the business of tourism, both the business tourism and leisure tourism is seasonal in nature.
Yeah.
And that is why now I've told you we've come up with very specific strategic business units now to localize activities that are supplementary.
Yeah.
And just like I told you, we're taking back KICC to be the hub of concerts, to be the hub of other related activities that are aligned to the mandate of meetings, incentives, to supplement that revenue as and when there is slack period of international and local events. Yeah, so we have literally a parallel supplementary system which is more local-based. And that's why I told you also we've invested heavily on bringing that entertainment element of the high-pressure dancing fountains. We are at a very advanced stage of revitalizing the heliport. I think we're already done with the Kenya Airports Authority, meteorology. So before long, we should have guys starting shooting movies at that heliport. And of course, it is another revenue stream.
All right.
Yeah, we already obtained not the commercial licenses, but the approvals to go ahead by the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Then from there, we went to the meteorology. We also cleared with them. So we are back to the Kenya Aviation Authority now to attain the commercial license. We want people to shoot movies there, to do the music there. I think we've had 2 performances up there by particular groups. So we are doing well on alternative sources of revenue to supplement the conferences during the slack periods when international conferences probably are not as booming, and equally during periods where, as a result of other national issues or international issues like the pandemics that we can't control, how then we sustain the center without bothering the national treasury.
All right, Bwana CEO, thanks so much for making time to speak to us. And of course, I will make sure we hold you to that promise of getting KICC profit after tax to at least a billion
by 3 years' time. Yes,
in 3 years' time.
Yes.
And of course, that's a good place to end it. Thank you so much for making time to watch Market Pulse and to listen to the conversation here on Hot 96. Remember, this happens every Wednesday, same time, same place.